Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 322R brush cutter. Customer complaint is that he hasn't run it in a while, and when he gets it started, it just kind of bogs. It doesn't have any power. Looking in the fuel tank, it appears as though he's got fresh fuel in it, although the damage may have already been done if he just put that fresh fuel on top of some other fuel. So let's just see if this thing will prime and fire it up and see what it acts like. Alright, so it did start. That's encouraging. We're going to give this thing a carb rebuild, tune-up. Before we do any of that, we're going to make sure that the cylinder is clean and not scored. Pull out the spark plug and take a look inside. Now, you can look in through the spark plug hole. You could drop an inspection camera in here. You could pull the exhaust and look in through the muffler. He had a spark plug in there that was brand new, but it was the wrong heat range. Not a huge difference, but we're putting the right plug in. Alright, now let's pull this top cover off of here. There's two screws on top of the starter and one on top of the clutch. On some models, there'll be screws that are coming in from the muffler shield and into that top cover. You'd have to remove those as well. Now that little foam air filter I pulled out of there, a lot of times we'll find that those are just deteriorated. So look at this, the multi-uses of a scrunch. Use it for removing gas caps. That's one good job. We already used it for spark plugs. That's what they are intended for. We're dumping his fuel out, but holy cow, look how rich that fuel that was in there was mixed. It was probably 50 to 1, but 50 parts oil, 1 part gas. So there's a screw right there underneath the air filter, and then there's two screws that run in through the end of this air filter holder, and they bolt the carb on. So we'll get those two screws out of there, and then the throttle cable is attached to this air filter holder as well. So we can remove that from the cable. There's a broken fuel line. We'll remove the cable itself from the carburetor. And that carb is just kind of stuck on there. Luckily we got a scrunch hammer. We can get that off of there. So I don't think that carb's ever been off of there. All these fuel lines are getting pretty rotten. So we're going to replace everything here. Yeah, that line's deteriorating. That's no good. So we'll pull out what's remaining. There's a return line. What are we digging for? Oh, more fuel line. So this is just a matter of matching up diameter of fuel line, length of fuel line. Cutting a little taper on the end of the fuel line so it'll push through the grommet. And that's a return line, so that's going to go to the primer bulb on the long stem. Now we've got a fuel line that the filter is going to be attached to. We get that down into the tank, and then we're going to put a new filter on it. Right. Oh, I didn't have a filter there. I had to go chase one out of the parts room. Putting this filter on a line, sometimes the line is a little too, the hole is a little too small. Using something like this, what do you call these pliers? I forget. Hemostat? Using something like that to open up the line a little bit. You know, don't get carried away. Don't compromise the integrity of the fuel line. If you got to warm the fuel line up a little bit, that would help. So our pump cover comes off the carburetor, and our metering diaphragm cover's got to come off. And sometimes these are stuck and you need some help getting them off. So what would you use to do that? Okay, so what did we learn? We learned a scrunch works good as a hammer. And we learned that that metering diaphragm was really stiff. I mean, that was the cause of the problem right there. But I want to double check the seat where the needle sits in the carburetor. And using one of these small magnifying glasses really works well to get a good look inside there. So we've secured a new carb kit, and we're just going to put a new needle, a new diaphragm, a new pump gasket in here. Because the thing seemed to run but just bog a little bit, I'm not going to boil it out. Look at that, another use for a scrunch wedge. Alright, there's our new spring. And then we need a metering lever and a pin and a needle. And we just drop it in place and then tighten down the screw. There's a lot of good videos on the internet showing you how to do this that don't have someone's hand or thumb in the way. Alright. Tighten down the screw. Check our metering lever height. In this case, the metering lever should be flush with the top of the sides of the carburetor, and that's what I'm using that razor blade for. Scrunch wedge. And then new gaskets, and we'll finish putting this together. This kit comes with a few different gaskets. You have to make sure you grab the right ones. Hey, the circus is coming to town. Alright, now our pump diaphragm, gasket, and pump cover. Single screw holding this on. It's got to be tight. Don't strip it or break anything. Alright, we are measuring the length of the fuel line that's going to run from the carburetor to the primer bulb. This is the one that's pulling fuel through the carburetor to the primer. And that line will go on the short stem of the primer bulb. So that line I put on there is the one that comes from the tank with the filter on it. I guess I didn't get it short enough. So the other option would have been to pull some of the line back into the tank. And we'll get our air filter holder lined up here and bolted down. Now if you're doing a tune-up on a string trimmer, make sure you include inspecting and servicing the gear head on the end. If they have a place where you can grease the head, then make sure you take care of that for the customer. Check the string head, see if it needs to be refilled with some cutter line. Inspect the blade if you got a cutting disc on the end, see if it's sharp. So something was wrong with this primer bulb. I'm not sure what. I recorded this video a long time ago. I just don't remember what was going on with it. If one of the tabs was broken and it wasn't holding in there very good or what. But we put a new primer bulb in. Now we're going to hook up the throttle cable. It's got a Z bend in the end of it. It's a pretty simple job. And now we'll put our fuel lines back on the carb. One that goes from the carburetor to the primer goes on the short stem. And we'll double check the tightness of the bolts on the carburetor. And then put the last bolt in the top through the air filter end. Everything's nice and snug now. I'm going to put our cylinder cover back on. And there's be 3 screws that hold that down. Well, we're going to get ready to fire this thing up, see if it's going to run. So we're going to need some go-go juice here. So I hope you picked up a few new uses for the scrunch. That's all I got for you on the Husqvarna 322R brush cutter tune-up. Thanks for watching. Later.